One of the most frequently asked questions on luxury watches is about the price. Why are they so expensive? How, if an Apple Watch or even a fully automatic mechanical Seiko can cost just a few hundred, can another mechanical watch cost thousands and even tens of thousands? Let's find out. Looking to buy, sell, or exchange a premium watch? Visit Watchfinder, the pre-owned watch specialist. A big thank you to every single person who watches and enjoys these videos. It really means a huge amount to us, and to me personally. Your subscription would be hugely appreciated. It helps more than you can know. Thank you. Before we even begin, one of the greatest difficulties in making a successful watch, or indeed a successful anything, is selling it. Simply manufacturing a good product is not a surefire secret second phase to profit. You can make a good product and never sell a single one. In the literary world, there's a thing called self-publishing. Once seen as the lonely offshoot of proper traditional publishing, where failed authors would go to fulfill their egos, it's since become a place for authors to build larger audiences, earn more revenue, take control back from the companies that paid them pittance for a lifetime of servitude. In this world, you're not just a writer, you're an editor, cover designer, marketeer. It's all on you to achieve your dreams. But here's the funny thing. Many self-published authors consider the marketing side to be, well, for want of a better word, cheating. They say a successful product should sell itself. They say if you build it, they will come. They, boys and girls, are wrong. There's a reason Apple's marketing spend is greater than the GDP of the Gambia, why you'll see Rolex plastered all over any sport that's even vaguely middle class. No one will buy your product if they don't know it exists. And furthermore, a statistically insignificant number of people that effectively amounts to no one will be the first to buy your product once they do realize it exists. You may have never even heard of Frederique Constant, but I certainly expect you've heard of Patek Philippe. I expect you'd be able to correctly pick whose marketing budget was whose. Does that mean if Frederique Constant had Patek Philippe spend, it would become as popular? No, not at all. Patek Philippe is well known because it's been making sure of it for a long, long time. The cumulative awareness is almost untouchable. It's also very expensive to maintain. So why, you might be asking yourself, is Seiko, a global conglomerate with a presumably enormous marketing budget, able to sell its watches so cheap compared to the Frederique Constant at some 10 times the price, and the Patek Philippe at 100 times the price? Of the many factors at play, one of the most prominent is volume. Patek Philippe makes some 60,000 watches per year, which seems like a lot, until you consider that Seiko makes that many in just 5 hours. You don't need me to tell you that those Seikos aren't being made by people. And you don't need me to tell you that when a Japanese company has the capability to manufacture billions of parts, that its economies of scale are through the roof. So good is Seiko at developing technology to make components cheaper, faster, and more accurate, that this company that started off making watches now also produces a whole array of other precision electronics and mechanics too. The tech pays for itself when it can be applied to everything from optical glass to semiconductors and everything else in between. Patek Philippe, whilst not entirely free of mechanical interference, leans more heavily on skilled manual labour to make its watches. It's part of the brand, of course, and it plays a fine balance between making enough watches to make the business viable and making too many and losing its exclusivity. People, especially Swiss people, are a lot more expensive than machines. When there's 2,000 of them, like there are at Patek Philippe, the ratio of people per watch is made starts to look rather costly indeed. And that is of course reflected in the price, which, being as popular a brand as it is, the market can bear. Frederique Constant, however, sits somewhere in a strange no man's land. Being a younger brand, some century and a half younger than Patek Philippe, and with less than 200 employees, a tenth of Patek Philippe and a 60th of Seiko, it benefits from neither brand equity nor economies of scale, and that puts it in a bit of a tricky spot. Its production is something around twice that of Patek Philippe's, still a million miles away from Seiko, yet it adopts many of the hand-assembled, not made, we'll get into that later, practices seen at the more expensive brand. The net result? A cheap alternative to Patek Philippe costs more than you'd expect. Perhaps it seems off to leave the actual production of the watch to the end, but really, it's a representationally accurate depiction of the companies themselves. Like the self-published author's role extending way beyond writing, a watch company is only in one small part about actually making watches. Those 2,000 people at Patek Philippe are not all watchmakers, not even close. We've covered the low-cost, high-volume automated option, so let's focus first on the extreme opposite, the handmade. Very few watches these days are handmade in the traditional sense, fashioned with elbow grease from start to finish, and the ones that are, you won't be surprised to learn, are limited by low production and therefore extreme cost. But when it comes to the commercially viable, Patek Philippe strikes the most impressive balance between quality and volume. The work is twofold: 1, ensuring extreme precision, and 2, extreme quality. Blank parts are the work of a machine, but the fine-tuning, finishing and assembly, i.e. all the tricky stuff, is completed by the hand of a skilled individual. Making low-quality components by hand is generally overlooked because it doesn't necessarily require a huge amount of skill, yet it is still very time-consuming. So the brushing, the polishing, the chamfering and the striping all get applied by a Swiss person who spent a long time learning how to do it to the high standards that have come to be expected of Patek Philippe in the last century and a half. And you can probably guess that's expensive. Not to mention the time spent testing and adjusting that goes into blueprinting every part by hand. A Seiko factory needs to be maintained, yes, but its machines aren't exactly on the payroll. This is again what makes Frederique Constant a bit of an oddity in the middle. Here you have an in-house movement that's partially hand-finished and hand-assembled, without which the appeal over the Seiko would be, well, it wouldn't be, would it? These aspects are some of the big draws of Swiss watchmaking in particular, that turn a watch into a luxury one, and that comes at a cost. One that's more than you might expect. The really interesting component of this comparison is the demonstration of how hard it is to build a luxury watch brand from scratch. There needs to be something that stands out, something unique. For Seiko, it's value. For Patek Philippe, it's heritage and quality. But for Frederique Constant, it's a real challenge. The idea of having something that apes Patek Philippe in experience and Seiko in cost is all fine in theory, but the expense of getting it in front of people, producing enough to make them cheaper without compromising exclusivity, and accommodating the skills needed to fulfill the promise of the artisanship, in a way makes the Frederique Constant the most impressive of the three. Discover more exceptional watches at Watchfinder. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please do consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If there are any watches you'd like to see featured, please let us know in the comments below.